call Biden a criminal. Why is that?
He is a criminal. He's a criminal. He got caught. Read his laptop. And you know who's a criminal? You're a criminal for not reporting it. You are a criminal for not reporting it. Let me tell you something. Joe Biden is a criminal, and he's been a criminal for a long time. And you're a criminal in the media for not reporting it. Good luck, everybody. Have a good time. People aren't buying at CNN, you dumb bastards. They're not buying it.
If you fuck around with us, if you do something bad to us, we are going to do things to you that have never been done before.
Hunter Biden, in many ways, is a weakness for the former vice president because of his work. He was I'll call it out. He's a swamp creature, like many people.
China ate your lunch, Joe, and no wonder your son goes in and he takes out billions of dollars. Takes out billions of dollars to manage. He makes millions of dollars. And also, while we're at it, why is it, just out of curiosity, the mayor of Moscow's wife gave your son $3.5 million. What did he do to deserve it?
And then he didn't answer the question of why did his son get $3.5 million from a Russian oligarch with ties to Putin? If Ivanka Trump had been bought a Big Mac in the Red Square by a Russian oligarch, they would have locked her up and they would have said, this is evidence of collusion. Here you have the media ignoring all of this.
And we've learned over the last couple of months, Joe Biden is a corrupt politician. He's a corrupt politician. And the Biden family is a criminal enterprise. Frankly, it makes crooked Hillary Clinton look like an amateur. Now, whoever saw anything like this? He goes to China, the kid is followed like a vacuum cleaner. He follows and follows and follows. And unfortunately, it sounds like he left his laptop behind, and they have thousands.
This week, Twitter and Facebook under fire over decisions concerning the publication of a story by the New York Post. The newspaper published an exclusive based on emails and photos allegedly obtained from a laptop belonging to the son of Democratic candidate Joe Biden. The story focused on Hunter Biden's ties to a Ukrainian energy company. The Post claims that Joe Biden met with an advisor of the company. Within hours, Facebook announced it was slowing the spread of the article, and Twitter blocked its users from posting links to the story, deeming it potentially unsafe, saying the material violated its rules on sharing information obtained through hacking. Now, Twitter has since backtracked. Instead of blocking links from being shared, the tweets are now being labeled to provide context. The Biden campaign denies the reporting by the New York Post. Since the 2016 election, pressure has been mounting on Twitter and Facebook to tackle political disinformation and interference. The latest moves and the inconsistencies which they are being applied is raising questions.
And Mr. Biden, what is your response to the New York Post story about your son, sir?
I know you'd ask it. I have no response. It's another smear campaign. Right up your alley. They're the questions you always ask.
Do you know how you know that something is true? When somebody calls it a smear campaign and doesn't deny that any of it is fake.
You know, Hunter Biden is an energy expert, which is why he was on an energy board in the Ukraine, a country the United States just helped overthrow. So the New York Post got a hold of some secret emails. Somehow it funneled through Rudolph Giuliani, of all people. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they got a hold of these emails that show Hunter Biden being, the sleazy bag influence peddler that he is. Right? The Bidens are all corrupt. Ukrainian exec thanked Hunter Biden for opportunity to meet the VTAB. But this isn't the whole story. The bigger story is that this story is being censored by Facebook and Twitter.
News that Twitter and Facebook have gone to astonishing lengths, frightening lengths, to stop you reading. And this is, in fact, two scandals in one. This is a big story. But when I tried to click on a link to Twitter, on Twitter to this story today, and I wouldn't have been the only one. Millions would have done the same. This is what I and others saw. Warning, this link may be unsafe. The link you are trying to access has been identified by Twitter or our partners as being potentially spammy or unsafe. Unsafe what? Rubbish. Unsafe to Joe Biden, maybe. I pushed on, and this is what Twitter was trying to stop me and others from seeing, a story that was unsafe only for Joe and his son. But if you tried to retweet that story then, Twitter wouldn't let you. Your tweet could not be sent because Twitter said this link has been identified by Twitter or our partners being potentially harmful. And do you know Facebook did much the same? It put out a post. This story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform. Now, the excuses that Twitter and Facebook gave for this political censorship, let's be honest about it, that's all it is, political censorship, changed during the day. Oh, look, the link was unsafe. No, the material was stolen, these emails. No, actually, it was private information. It was false, whatever. Look, it wasn't stolen. And when did Twitter and Facebook ever apply those same standards to protecting Donald Trump? Trump's tax records the other day were stolen and leaked. Twitter and Facebook didn't mind. No warnings there. No bans on retweeting. And for years, the media published, promoted, talked up a faked dossier that Democrats had paid for that claimed that Donald Trump had paid prostitutes in Russia to urinate on a bed, allegedly used by Barack Obama, and that it colluded with Russia to steal the election. Did you see any Twitter bans on that stuff? Twitter and Facebook, they're running a protection racket of Joe Biden and keeping news from you using their incredible market power. It is a disgrace and a threat to democracy.
We've got a person named Donald Trump who has been warned that he is receiving and is now regurgitating, repeating, and disseminating disinformation that he knows to be fabricated and supplied by a foreign intelligence service. And despite the warning, he's still doing it.
Rudy basically functioning as a Russian asset by pushing Russian disinformation.
You talked about him being an unwitting Russian asset. Jonathan Tate, you went a step further in your cover story for New York Magazine this week. We could put it on screen, I think. You talked about whether President Trump has actually been a Russian asset for decades. Now, you acknowledge that this is unlikely, but you're making the point that it's possible.
Serious questions tonight about whether the Russians are using Rudy Giuliani to interfere in the U.S. presidential election.
Massive indeed, Wolf. We do know that it's a very active Russian campaign. That's according to the U.S. intelligence community, and that Rudy Giuliani already had open contact with a person that the U.S. has called an agent for the Kremlin. Now, we are being told by two people who've been briefed on what the FBI is doing, that they're looking into whether these unverified emails about Hunter Biden that were published earlier this week by the New York Post about his business dealings in Ukraine and China are part of this bigger Russian disinformation effort in the 2020 election.
The director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, in the last half hour said that the Hunter Biden laptop emails not part of some Russian disinformation campaign.
Breaking news. President Trump spreading Russian disinformation to try to discredit Joe Biden.
He has retweeted an account that put out a recording of a telephone call from 2016 between the former Ukrainian president, Petro Poroshenko, and former Vice President Joe Biden, which President Trump supporters say points to the fact that Vice President Biden got a Ukrainian prosecutor fired in order to help his son Hunter. Now, there's no evidence of any of that.
Over, for, I guess, the 12th, 13th time to Kyiv, and I was supposed to announce that there was another $1 billion loan guarantee. And I had gotten a commitment from Poroshenko and from Yatsenyuk that they would take action against the state prosecutor, and they didn't. So they said they were walking out to press conference. I said, no, I said, we're not going to give you the $1 billion. They said, you have no authority. You're not the president. The president said. I said, call him. I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting the $1 billion. I said, you're not getting the $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Well, son of a bitch. Got fired. And they put in place someone who was solid.
CNN reported on Friday that U.S. authorities are seeing if those emails we just talked about are connected to an ongoing Russian disinformation effort.
Can anyone say that these emails are inauthentic? And so far, I haven't heard anybody say that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think anybody's saying they are inauthentic.
Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to D.C. and giving me an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. Wow. It's really an honor and a pleasure, the email reads. The never-before-revealed meeting is mentioned in a message of appreciation from an advisor to the board of Burisma, that's that energy company in the Ukraine, sent Hunter Biden on April 17th, 2015, about a year after Hunter joined the Burisma board at a salary of up to $50K a month. An earlier email from May 24th also shows Burisma's number 3 executive asking Hunter for advice on how you could use your influence on the company's behalf. And here's Joe Biden being asked about it.
What was your role as vice president in charge of policy in Ukraine and your son's job in Ukraine? How is that not a conflict of interest?
It's not a conflict of interest. There's been no indication of any conflict of interest from Ukraine or anywhere else. Period. I'm not going to respond to that. Let's focus on the problem. Focus on this man, what he's doing that no president has ever done. No president.
So that's all they got to say. He won't answer the question about it. No, there's no conflict of interest. He just says it.
There's been no indication of any conflict of interest.
There's been no indication. The indication would be, Joe, that you're the vice president in charge of Ukraine policy for the United States, and your son has a job in the Ukraine, a no-show job for $50K a month on an energy board. That would be it. That'd be the indication. But the real story is now Twitter and Facebook are censoring that story before they even fact check it. They're going to go, it sounds sketchy, so we're gonna limit that story. And here's what you do. If you really are afraid that that story's not real, you then hire somebody to check it out and write their own report about the story, and then you put your report up. You don't censor somebody else's story. Otherwise, Facebook is being a publisher. So the reason why, if somebody writes something in a book that's defamatory that you can prove in court, a civil court, and receive damages from the guy who wrote it, the reason why you sue the guy who wrote it is because you can't sue the guy who sold it. So you can't sue the bookstore, but you can sue the guy who wrote it and the publisher. Facebook is also trying to say they are not a publisher, so you can't sue them when something goes up on their website that hurts you personally. But they are a publisher, so now they're curating what goes on their website. So now they're taking responsibility for the content of the books in their store, which means you can now sue them. They should be sued.
Facebook and Twitter have policies to not spread things that are utterly unreliable, that have been debunked, and where their origin is untrustworthy. They're practicing their own internal controls, as I wish they had over the past 4 years. If they had been more selective about what they posted in 2016, don't take my word for it, listen to the head of the FBI. An active Russian disinformation campaign in 2016 had an influence on that election. They are trying even harder in this election. I'm glad that they are managing the content on their own websites.
The same policy was implemented over the summer to ban links to a trove of hacked police documents called Blue Links. So they're exposing, again, so somebody comes along and does actual journalism and Facebook squashes it. According to the policy discussion of hacks, including reporting on a hack or sharing press coverage of hacking, that according to the policy, so the policy at Facebook is that including reporting on a hack or sharing press coverage of hacking.
They're saying it's been hacked, and that's why Twitter is saying that they've had to block the publication of this story. But the question is, could it be hacked if you've left it behind? And then that also goes counter to the Biden argument that they're not real.
Yeah, well, I didn't notice the New York Times or Twitter or Facebook having any trouble publishing Donald Trump's stolen tax records, but different rules apply when it goes the other way, I guess.
Sharing press coverage of hacking, that according to the policy, so the policy at Facebook is that including reporting on a hack or sharing press coverage of hacking does not violate their rules. So the Twitter spokesman, so this doesn't violate their rules, and they're not telling you what rule it violates. The Twitter spokesman did not immediately respond to questions about why the post reporting is not included under that exemption. Facebook also took action to limit the article's spread, but offered a few details regarding those steps. So they need to be regulated now.
Please, if you don't think people aren't going to look back at those rallies with the same horror that we now look back on the Salem witch trials, You don't think that's going to happen 50 years from now, 100 years from now? You're kidding yourself.
Joined now by former New York City Police Commissioner Bernie Kerik. Yeah, folks, if you want to go and follow Commissioner Kerik on Twitter, you can't. His account has been suspended. Was the lockout because of your posts about this scandal, Bernie?
You know, the bottom line is I've reviewed the drive on several days with Mayor Giuliani, and you know, it's kind of stunning. There's about 28,000 images, just under 28,000. There's about 60,000 text messages and emails, and I have to admit, we're not through it all. We're probably through, you know, less than half of it. You know, the fact that Joe Biden says that he never had a conversation with his son about his business dealings, that's a lie. There's proof in the emails that that's not true. There's deals that they discuss, that's discussed in the emails, where Biden gets 10% of one thing. In another email, he's talking about 50% that he had to give his father. You know, there's just, it's overwhelming. You know, and here's the one thing that really bugs me, Chris. They put Rod Blagojevich in prison for 14 years for talking politics on a phone when he had no personal, professional, or political gain. None, zero. This family has taken in millions of dollars off of Joe Biden's position, and there doesn't seem to be a real investigation when, in fact, we know that the FBI picked up that computer and a hard drive on December 9th of 2019. How these guys are not in handcuffs, how there's not an active, ongoing investigation, I don't know. But I think it's something the president has to look at and hold people accountable that failed in their duties.
Is Donald Trump's fixation with Putin about some material gain he thinks he can get from him? Or does he maybe see him as sort of a new Fred Trump?
The Russian bots. Order up your Russian bots, okay? And you're off to the races.
CNN also reported that the walkaway movement was just a bunch of Russian bots.
A lot of Russian bots, a lot of bots online, targeting, doing the dirty work of Russia.
You have said this entire thing is so obviously a Russian plot. It is to me, and I was never even an ambassador to the Russian Federation. Tell me why it's so obviously a Russian plot to you.
You're peddling the narrative that the Trump administration is putting out, which also is the Putin narrative, because they're retweeting this with their Russian bots. This, if you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin,
I wonder, do you perceive
if you're on the same side as WikiLeaks and Putin, you should take a step back and wonder, whose bidding are you really doing?
I don't even know what to say. I don't want to explode on TV, so I'm just going to end the segment now. Let the record reflect you accused me of working for a hostile foreign government.
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. That's been clear for well over a year now, that they've been pushing this false narrative about the vice president and his son. But I guess at this point, we can't be shocked by anything this administration does, no matter how craven. But clearly, the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin, and the president is only too happy to have Kremlin help in trying to amplify it.
You're on the Intel Committee. Let me just ask you one final question. Can you look right into the camera and say, I know for a fact the government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of John Podesta's email?
Absolutely. The government of Vladimir Putin was behind the hacks of our institution and the dumping of information.
Of John Podesta's email.
Not only in the United States, but also in Europe.
Okay, you're not, you know what, you're dodging.
And Tucker,
no, look and say, I know they did. John Podesta's email, they hacked
and
those.
I think that Ronald Reagan will be rolling over his grave at your carrying water for the Kremlin.
I'm not carrying water for the, you're a sitting member of Congress on the Intel Committee, and you can't say they hacked.
You're gonna have to move your show to RT Russian television, because
you know what?
This
That's
is perfect.
Just so
this is perfectly
beneath your
placed.
office, because it's so dumb and you're being duplicitous. I'm asking you, did they hack Podesta's emails? And you can't say it.
Personal insults like that, Tucker.
You just said I was carrying. You said I was carrying water for Putin. That's pretty hilarious.
You know, when you essentially are an apologist for the Kremlin, that's what you're doing.
I'm an apologist. One last time, Congressman. look into the camera and say they hacked John Podesta's emails. We know for a fact that Putin's government did that. You can't, and you know you can't, and you're hiding behind weasel words.
I just said that the
say they hacked John Podesta's emails.
Russians, I'm not going to be specific as to
because you don't know it. That's why. All right, done. One. You don't know it, and you're alleging it without any evidence, and it's wrong.
You're ignoring the evidence because you don't care. The fact that it helped the Republican candidate is all you need to know, apparently.
That's totally false. I just think if you're going to make a serious allegation about an actual country with an actual government, you ought to know what you're talking about, and you don't.
I think that you ought to accept.
I got to go. I'm taking cash from Putin now. I'm on RT.
Republicans on the Intelligence Committee have seen for a fact.
If you could say it, you would, and you can't. And you know that.
If you're willing to be in denial about this because it suits a Republican-elect president.
Okay, whatever. You can blather on all you want, man, but I gave you a chance to state it clearly, and you wouldn't, which tells you everything you know.
You
all right.
Or a president-elect. Okay. Not very much, apparently.
I appreciate that, Congressman. And now I need to take a call from Vladimir Putin, so I'm going to put you on hold for 1 second.
And to me, this is just classic textbook Soviet-Russian tradecraft at work. All of a sudden, two and a half weeks before the election, this laptop appears somehow.
They're looking into whether these unverified emails about Hunter Biden that were published earlier this week by the New York Post about his business dealings in Ukraine and China are part of this bigger Russian disinformation effort in the 2020 election.
In 2014, Ukrainians, sick of corruption, revolted. Vice President Joe Biden went to Kiev to help the new government.
You have to fight the cancer of corruption.
But then, something strange happened. Just 3 weeks later, a Ukrainian natural gas company, Burisma, accused of corruption, appoints Hunter Biden, seen here in their promotional videos, to their board of directors, paying his firm more than $1 million a year.
Last week, the New York Post published one of the great scoops of the year. The paper's editors got a copy of the hard drive from Hunter Biden's personal laptop. On it were tens of thousands of emails, videos, texts, and photographs. Much of the material on the laptop is of limited relevance to the public. Not everything a famous person does in the course of a day has news value. Some of the pictures in the laptop were sad and weird, of prurient interest only. We're not going to show the bad ones on this show. And by the way, if we're being honest, some of the exchanges between Hunter Biden and his father, and they're on there too, reveal that whatever you say about him, Joe Biden really loves his son, and they're touching. We want to be honest about that. But there's one very newsworthy series of emails, and they stuck out. They showed that as Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden tailored American foreign policy, our foreign policy, which Joe Biden does not own, in order to help his son's business interests. Biden intervened aggressively in the internal affairs of another sovereign nation, Ukraine, and his son got paid for that. By any measure, that is a real story. There's no spinning it. That's a story. But then, very quickly, something bigger than that happened, something far more dangerous to our country than anything the New York Post found on Hunter Biden's laptop. Here's what happened. The most powerful people in the world aligned to censor the news, to keep it from the population of the United States. Twitter prevented its users from sharing the story. So did Facebook. When Americans searched Google to read the New York Post story, many couldn't find it. So within hours, the promise of a free press, that's the basis of American democracy and has been for 250 years, just disappeared. 1 minute, we were America. The next minute, we were China. Horrifying. And perhaps most horrifying of all, our news media applauded it. The self-described guardians of the First Amendment cheered the destruction of the First Amendment. The New York Times actually ran an op-ed attacking the idea of free speech. Ideas that threaten the ruling class must be squelched, put down. That's their position. Every power center in America vehemently agreed with that. And most ominous of all, the U.S. intelligence community, the secretive federal agencies that have nearly unlimited power, joined in. Those agencies colluded with the news media to hide information from the American public weeks before a presidential election. On Saturday, USA Today kicked off the effort by publishing one of the most dishonest newspaper stories ever to run in this country. Federal authorities are investigating, the paper declared, whether the story about Hunter Biden's laptop was, quote, part of a smoke bomb of disinformation pushed by Russia. The Russians did it. That was the point of the piece. In fact, it was the only point of the piece. The newspaper never bothered to assess whether the core story was true. Are the facts right? And that used to be the very first and most important question in journalism. Is the allegation true? Everything else flows from that. But USA Today didn't even ask that question. Nor did the newspaper explain how this Russian plot might have worked in practical terms. The computer repair shop owner in Wilmington, for example, he must have been in on it. He had physical possession of the laptop. So was this seemingly mild-mannered Mac repairman yet another one of Vladimir Putin's hand-picked sleeper agents? Had he been lying in wait in a Delaware strip mall for decades, preparing for just this moment? USA Today didn't tell us. They didn't need to tell us because the rest of the media understood instantly what to do. FBI probed if purported Hunter Biden emails are a Russian plot, declared Bloomberg News. PBS, which you pay for, it's publicly funded, cited a, quote, senior former intelligence official, whose salary you also paid, to claim that Rudy Giuliani was likely channeling Russian disinformation. So the former mayor of New York is working for Vladimir Putin, too. That's how vast this conspiracy was. Reporters in Washington and New York frantically called their many sources in the permanent national security state for more details. From his perch on Twitter, desiccated neocon ghoul David Frum cheered them on. Vast experience lying in the run-up to the Iraq War, he put those talents to use. In this frenzy to find this new batch of Russian spies, the media did miss a few obvious leads. For example, two people reporters forgot to call were Joe and Hunter Biden. Presumably the Bidens could have confirmed whether or not the famous laptop was real, and that would have ended the speculation. It would have informed the rest of us. But somehow no one thought to do that. Finally, last Friday night, one reporter, Bo Erickson of CBS, blurted out the question to Joe Biden himself. And here's what happened next.
I have no response. It's another smear campaign. It's right up your alley. They're the questions you always ask.
Oh, it's a smear campaign right up your alley. I have no response, said Joe Biden. Biden didn't deny the story because he knows that laptop from the Delaware repair shop did in fact belong to his son, Hunter. And we know it too. We confirmed that conclusively last week. Everything we have learned since then, and there has been a lot that we've learned since then, bolsters that conclusion. The laptop in question belonged to our Hunter Biden, period. So Bo Erickson of CBS asked a legitimate question. And for that very reason, within minutes, Democratic operatives, including many in the media, landed on him. The point of attacking a man who appears to be a fairly liberal CBS reporter was to send a message to the rest of the press corps. Shut up and obey the narrative, or else. According to Greg Sargent of the Washington Post, quote, the real problem here is this is a useless question from a journalistic perspective. Large parts of the story are invented, unconfirmed, highly dubious. What is learned by placing the work of denying them on Biden, end quote. Notice Greg Sargent doesn't explain what parts are unconfirmed or false. No part of this story, no email has been shown to be false. They're not even claiming it's false. Michael McFaul, he now works at Stanford, he used to work in the Obama administration for 5 years, attacked Bo Erickson for, quote, discussing disinformation. You're not even allowed to discuss it. Then the actor of Alec Baldwin wrote this, quote, take the beat down, learn from it, and move on. What is this? It's happening in concert all at one time. What you're watching is the most powerful people in America aligning as one to hide legitimate information from the public. This is not the way our country used to operate. Are you terrified yet? You should be terrified because it worked. That's why they do it, because it works. Here are the questions reporters are asking Joe Biden now.
All right.
We got him. See, look.
Happy milkshake. We got one vanilla, one chocolate, but I wanted to get a what we call black and white, but we're going to move it another way. We're going to split it.
What flavor did you get? That was the question. This is a man who has relatively few opportunities to speak to the press, and when they get a chance, they ask, what flavor did you get? And if you don't want to end up like Bo Erickson of CBS, that's the kind of question you'd better ask the Democratic nominee for president with fewer than 2 weeks to go until Election Day. Another reporter had a follow-up. Listen to how that went. So the second the words FBI emerge, Joe Biden walks away. And yet that's not even the worst part of the clip you just saw. The worst part is the other journalists. They burst out laughing before they even hear the rest of the question. Asking about the FBI was unapproved. You can't talk about that. So the journalists laughed it down. That is state media protecting the powerful. No one thought to ask Biden why, if the laptop is a Russian invention, there's a letter from Hunter Biden's lawyer asking for the laptop back. Is he part of the conspiracy too? We don't know, and we're not going to learn, because Joe Biden has now gone into hiding until Thursday's debate. And that means the media can continue to collude unimpeded with our spy agencies to lie to you. It's the Russians, because Russia, and repeat after us as we say this until you reflexively believe it, because Russia is the greatest threat we face.
CNN reported on Friday that U.S. authorities are seeing if those emails we just talked about are connected to an ongoing Russian disinformation effort. Huh.
You know, at some point, you got to be honest and say, who cares what's on Hunter Biden's laptop? What you just saw is the real threat. The powerful, the most powerful in our country colluding to dismiss legitimate questions using a fake threat of Russian disinformation. That's scary. Rest assured, though, unnamed U.S. authorities are on the case, getting to the bottom of this Russian plot. There's no evidence of wrongdoing, of course, but they're still on the case. Who are these authorities exactly, and who are they working for? Well, on Saturday, Senator Chris Murphy, a sitting senator from Connecticut, let us know. Murphy is a Democrat. He sits on the Foreign Intelligence Committee. Here's what he wrote, quote, Joe Biden and all of us should be furious that media outlets are spreading what is very likely Russian propaganda. I've seen the intel. The mainstreaming of misinformation is Russia's 2020 goal, end quote. That's worse than anything Joe McCarthy of Wisconsin ever said, and dumber. I've seen the intel. Notice that Senator Murphy of Connecticut didn't tell us what the so-called intel said, much less show it to the rest of us so we could evaluate it for ourselves. Powerful people have seen the intel. You haven't. You must take their word for it. Otherwise, maybe you're working for Vladimir Putin. Maybe you're a Russian spy. You want to get accused of that? Of treason? I don't think so. So just take it on faith, pal. Adam Schiff is working that line for years now. This week he was back at it.
Well, we know that this whole smear on Joe Biden comes from the Kremlin. But clearly, the origins of this whole smear are from the Kremlin. And the president is only too happy to have Kremlin help in trying to amplify it. Seeing the president of the United States holding up a newspaper promoting Kremlin propaganda. It's really incredible.
It's really incredible, says Adam Schiff. Hard to believe he's still on television. Well, it is incredible. In fact, it's so incredible, it's not even true. This morning, the person who was in charge of gathering intelligence in this country, in charge of all the intel agencies, conceded that, in fact, this hysteria is an utter crock. There is no evidence the Russians are putting stories in the New York Post. That is insane.
Let me be clear. The intelligence community doesn't believe that because there's no intelligence that supports that. And we have shared no intelligence with Chairman Schiff or any other member of Congress that Hunter Biden's laptop is part of some Russian disinformation campaign. It's simply not true.
There's no intelligence that supports that. Yeah, okay. We're not in the intelligence community, so we can't verify that. We can't tell you there's no evidence that supports it. And evidence, actual evidence, is what the rest of us make decisions based on. And there's no evidence. And by the way, once again, no one in Joe Biden's campaign has said these emails or text messages are false. And if so, which ones are false? And how are they false? And they're not even claiming that. So these claims are coming from anonymous sources and media hacks, and that's it. On Sunday, a Biden campaign surrogate called Jenna Arnold acknowledged that on this channel. Watch this.
Can anyone say that these emails are inauthentic? And so far, I haven't heard anybody say that.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think anybody's saying they are inauthentic.
I don't think anybody is saying they're inauthentic? Well, okay. Then why don't you respond to them? But in fact, many are saying they're inauthentic. False claims of Russian interference in our democracy are now a well-established fact of American political life. Like fears about climate change and white supremacy, they are very useful to the people in charge, because those fears can be leveraged to strip you instantly of your constitutional rights. And that's exactly what's going on now. Now, you know why they're doing it. For the next 2 weeks, the point is to defeat Donald Trump, and they may succeed in doing that. But for the rest of us who plan to stay in this country, the real worry is what happens after that.
We have Hunter Biden's laptop. It is his laptop. The emails on the laptop are the evidence. This is not it doesn't come from Russia. It is actual emails from people. The other recipients of the emails have been contacted. They have said, yes, this is an email that I received. The MacBook repair shop guy has a signature from Hunter Biden, which matches other signatures of Hunter Biden on a work order that Hunter signed when he dropped off the laptop. The photographs, the evidence, it is all just speaks for itself. It is ridiculous. It is a fiction to insert somehow Russia into this story.
Let me ask you to pause there. What is that? I'm sorry, you work there. You work at the New York Post, and sitting members of Congress, House and Senate, office holders, are accusing you and your company is acting as tools for the Putin government. What's your reaction to that? How does that feel?
Well, just a kind of dismay. It's absurd. I mean, Adam Schiff is, the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee. He's supposed to be keeping America safe from overseas actors, and instead he's turning all the power of that committee onto journalists, onto a newspaper that is just trying to shine a light on what looks like wrongdoing by a man who is in 2 weeks perhaps going to be the president of the United States. And the rest of the media is colluding in that cover-up and pretending that this is Russian disinformation, a Russian hoax. It's a joke. Yes. And no wonder Joe Biden feels that he doesn't have to answer anything. And no wonder, because he's asked questions about the flavor of his ice cream instead of being asked what does he say about the evidence, the emails that show that he participated with his family in this cash for influence scheme.
ABC and NBC are a disgrace. ABC holds a town hall with Joe Biden, and not one question is asked about Hunter Biden's emails or his penchant to line the family coffers. It was all softballs. While over on NBC, Savannah Guthrie was playing deceitful and unfair hardball. She spent most of the night debating the president and asking him ridiculous questions in an effort to make him look bad. One of the most disingenuous came when she concocted nonsense about the infamous QAnon.
While we're denouncing, let me ask you about QAnon. It is this theory that Democrats are a satanic pedophile ring and that you are the savior of that.
Folks, Guthrie should be embarrassed that is the left-wing fictional account of QAnon. How do I know this? Because I did what Guthrie and NBC clearly didn't. Or if they did, they ignored it and lied to you. I have gone through QAnon's 4,880 posts. Now consider this. 100% of the mainstream media stories about QAnon claim Q talks about satanic sex rings, calls to violence, vampires, and even interdimensional demons. What the heck are those? But when I searched Q's posts on the aggregation website QAnon.pub, I could not find one post that mentions any of these things. Zero. I did find Satan is mentioned by Q 10 times and pedophilia mentioned 13 times. Remember, that is out of nearly 5,000 posts, less than 0.1% of them. But in nearly every case, those words were in actual links to articles, many of which focus on the Epstein sex trafficking scandal. Still, Guthrie insists Q is a, quote, cult-like group of deviants who are all off their rockers. And she wants the viewers to believe those cult member deviants are all in love with President Trump, right? It's a perfect fictional account if your goal is to tie the president to right-wing loons in an effort to hurt him with voters.
Now, can you just once and for all state that that is completely not true and that disavow QAnon in its entirety?
I know nothing about QAnon.
I just told you.
I know very little. You told me, but what you tell me doesn't necessarily make it fact. I hate to say that. I know nothing about it. I do know they are very much against pedophilia. They fight it very hard, but I know nothing about it.
They believe it is a satanic cult run by the deep state.
That may be what the media thinks Q is. But a little research proves it is a lie. Again, the nearly 5,000 Q posts just don't back up any of her claims. You see, this is nothing short of a malicious hit job on the president. But what else would you expect from leftist NBC? Now, I want to make this very clear. I don't know if QAnon is real or not. That's not the point of all this. What I do know is what QAnon claims to be. He claims to be a high-level government insider with high-level security clearances that posts on the evils of the deep state and entrenched anti-Trump bureaucrats. That's it. It's not a group, though, that has Q supporters. He clearly does. I couldn't find one post about a meetup or even a call to violence. Not one. Here is what I did find. Q posts a lot about mainstream media lies. He posts a lot. There are his thoughts on rogue anti-Trump FBI agents and the Russia collusion hoax, but the media can't have any of that. So in unison, nearly every mainstream media outlet has set out to discredit Q and, of course, tie the president to it. It's what NBC was doing last night. This includes the unhinged Savannah Guthrie.
Republican Senator Ben Sasse said, quote, QAnon is nuts and real leaders call conspiracy theories conspiracy theories. Why not just say it's crazy and not true?
He may be right. I just don't know about QAnon.
You do know.
I don't know. No, I don't know. I don't know.
Let me ask you another thing.
Let's waste a whole show. You start off with white supremacy. I denounce it. You start off with something else. Let's go. Keep asking me these questions.
I do have one more on this vein.
Let me just tell you, what I do hear about it is they are very strongly against pedophilia. And I agree with that. I mean, I do agree with that, and I agree with it.
But there's not a satanic pedophile cult
no
being run
idea.
by.
I know nothing
You don't know
about
that? Okay.
No, I don't know
You
that.
just this
neither
week.
do you know that.
Okay.
No, she doesn't know that. She didn't do the research that I did. Again, every post, there's no sign of satanic pedophilia, nothing like that. In that one interaction, the president proves why Savannah and her cronies really are the fake news media. What a waste of time. But more importantly, what a load of lies, used as a weapon to wage a verbal assault on the president. But the president has a much more powerful weapon on his side. It is called the truth, something the mainstream media knows absolutely nothing about.